Okay, welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here weekly, working at simplifying things in our lives one day at a time, one simple step at a time. And together, guys, we can do this. I'm your host, Michelle Visser, and this week we are talking with Dr. Glenn Livingston. Dr. Livingston has a PhD in psychology, and he was the CEO. I found this fascinating, Glenn, of a multi-million-dollar consulting firm, which did service several Fortune 500 clients in the food industry. His work has been quoted in the New York Times, the LA Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, the New York Daily Times. The list goes on and on. Disillusioned by what traditional psychology had to offer overweight or food obsessed people, Dr. Livingston spent several decades researching the nature of binge eating and overeating via work with his own clients and with the research program with more than 40,000 participants. So when I saw his book, Defeat Your Cravings, The Back Door to Weight Loss, I reached out to Glenn and I was so happy that you could join us today, Glenn. Thank you for being here.
Very happy to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, well, me too, because I'm just fascinated with your whole story. So tell us, first of all, why did you write this book?
Oh, well, I lost a war with a chocolate bar in 1982, and I didn't wake up for about 20 years. I used
You
to be
know what? Chocolate does it to me too. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah. No, I was almost 300 pounds. I had triglycerides through the roof, over 1,000, eczema, rosacea, psoriasis, all types of problems.
Wow.
Um, and I went the traditional psychological route. I come from a family of 17 psychotherapists, and something breaks.
Wait, pause. 17 really?
Well, my mom and my dad and my stepmom and my stepdad and my aunt and my uncle and my cousins and my
Wow.
grandmother. And
Wow. And all of you chose to go into the same field in one way or another.
when something broke in the house, we asked it how it felt, and nobody knew how to fix it. That's and I used to have
Uh,
my 9-year-old little friends would come over. We'd go downstairs. I'd have them lie down on the couch and tell me about their mother. It's all I ever wanted to do. it's it's all I ever
You
wanted
might
to
have
do.
been that child I warned mine to not go over to their
Yeah,
house.
yeah, yeah. You should have. There was trouble. There was trouble. Um,
Uh, So I thought
but
it was interesting that your book, you make it very clear right in the beginning that this is a battle you fought and you tell your story and you go into great depth. But I was really intrigued when I realized the depth that you have helped others then. So it's not just your story, it's all these other people that are benefiting from what you learned with your own
Well,
story.
yeah, I mean, long story short, I wrote a book as I was getting divorced about the odd way that I solved the problem. And that book wound up really taking off, had over 1 million readers. I wrote,
Oh, wow. What's that one called?
that was Never Binge Again. I'd rather people didn't read that one because
Okay. Okay.
it's kind of older, and
Okay.
there's
Gotcha.
some mistakes in my thinking at that point.
Hmm.
But it's how I recovered.
Okay.
Um, Defeat Your Cravings is the book that I wrote after writing 7 more books and having not just 1 million readers on, of the books themselves, but another 1 million readers on Psychology Today and over 2,000 paying clients. And we update it with all of the latest science, and people are kind of confused about what cravings actually are and how they're formed and extinguished. And that confusion, people don't know that they're confused, but that confusion actually keeps them addicted, prevents them from managing their cravings in a way that they could, eat what they love and still feel in control for the most part.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
so
I
yeah,
want to
that
actually get into that too. But I'm fascinated that you were working in a marketing role of all things with the whole big commercial food industry. We talk a lot about that here on the show and the deception and how we are so easily deceived as the consumer. But I've honestly never thought about the deception that you have so much insight to. So first of all, tell us, what was your role? What were you doing with these
so,
large
so
commercial foods?
I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I came
Okay.
from a scientist practitioner program, and my ex-wife was a focus group moderator, and she traveled for
Okay.
business, so we didn't have kids. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and I started doing these experiments for advertising research for these large companies,
Mhm.
basically to figure out what the emotional motivation was for people to respond to certain packaging or spokesmodels or advertising messaging. You know, and in some ways, there were some companies I worked for where I felt like I did some good. Mostly, I feel like I was on the wrong side of the war, and
But I'm
I
guessing at the time you didn't necessarily feel that way.
no,
Yeah.
no. Well, I mean, I help big companies sell sugar to kids and stuff, and I did feel like it was wrong, but I felt like I was going to get to a position of influence and then help them to make
Right.
things that were healthier,
Yeah.
and that was delusional. There's
Yeah.
just too much money floating
I
around
was
to
just gonna say that. There isn't as much money if you go the other way, for sure.
no.
Um,
The packaged goods market is about $7 trillion, and the market for produce or whole fruits and vegetables is like 200 billion. It's like 1/20th the size. It's
wow.
yeah.
Wait a minute, can you break that down again? That I've never even thought about that.
Packaged goods, packaged
Yeah.
foods, around 7 trillion. I think
So when
7
you're
point
buying
7.
your boxed mac and cheese and your frozen pizzas, all of those, you add it up to about $7 trillion like a
When,
year that
when
people are
you are
spending?
looking for love at the bottom of a bag, box, or a container, there is some fat cat in a white suit with a mustache laughing all the way to the bank. There's a
Oh,
lot of money
so
there.
true.
And there are 5 to 7,000 messages per year beamed at us on the internet and the airwaves. And how many of them do you think are to eat more fruits and vegetables? Um, so I was,
For
I was,
sure.
I was on the wrong side of the war.
Mm,
I think in a democracy, the responsibility falls to the consumer somewhat, but I still feel like there should be more legislation and protection to help people because there are chemicals in some of these packages that make it impossible for you to know when you're hungry and full.
yeah.
They're pressing your evolutionary buttons. They're spending tens of millions of dollars on rocket scientists to engineer these hyperpalatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and oil and excitotoxins and salt, and it's just all geared to hit the bliss point in your reptilian brain without giving you the nutrition to feel satisfied.
Yeah.
Um, so
Now you talk about reptilian brain in your book. Can you wanna define that for us?
well, I'm not a neurologist, and a neurologist would take me to task, but in very oversimplified terms.
That's what we need, please.
Okay. So there's the brainstem, the kind of the earliest part of our brain to develop. And it's responsible for survival impulses. Um, Eat, mate, or kill, fight or flee, um,
Mhm.
reproduce or run away, feast or famine.
Yeah.
And 100,000 years ago, when food was relatively scarce and we had to gather all the calories we could, this part of the brain had the ability to push aside the higher part of the brain, the neocortex, which says, wait, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact does that have on the people that you love? What impact does that have on your long term goals, on your health and your fitness and your weight loss? This thing could just get pushed aside because it was like, feed me, get the calories,
Okay.
feed me.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's the emergency response system. It
Okay.
says,
Okay.
and in the modern food environment, it's not a healthy thing, unfortunately. But cravings are really generated therein, and
Yeah.
if you
And you
have strong,
mention Go ahead. Sorry.
well, people think that cravings are a sign of a sick mind. Like, what's wrong with me? Why do I have such strong cravings? The truth is really what's right with you. Why do you have such strong cravings? 100,000 years ago, your ancestors survived when other people died because they had stronger cravings than other people. It's the fact that we live in an environment where I could walk downstairs to the convenience store, buy 100,000 calories for about $100 or at least 10,000 calories for $100, right? And
Today,
walk
yeah.
and walk across the street and do it again.
Yeah.
Um, it's our brains are not designed for that kind of environment.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Makes sense. And in the book, you mentioned how we're wired as human beings it's just the way we're wired to naturally have bad eating habits. And you realize that the big food industry was capitalizing on this natural tendency that we have. So, it was
yeah,
compounding it. So, first of all, can you break down for us, like, more about how we are wired towards this naturally bad
Well,
choices?
it's what I was saying. We're wired to take advantage of calorie acquisition when it's available.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
we would have starved if we weren't.
okay.
Where we're wired to pay really close attention to the cues in the environment that lead to calorie acquisition. If there was a caveman 100,000 years ago who saw a monkey, let's call the caveman Thag, Thag, because I like the name,
Mhm.
and Thag sees a monkey and the monkey leads him to a banana tree. Thag's brain gets really excited the next time he sees a monkey, secretes a whole bunch of dopamine, makes him really happy, makes him really motivated to follow monkeys again. If Thag does not follow that monkey, Thag's brain makes him miserable, depletes the dopamine, says, I'm going to torture you until you follow that monkey. Today, we know that you can take advantage of those food cues with, very bright, colorful branded signs that, I pass the donut store sign and I know that that signals the availability of donuts and coffee, donuts and coffee,
Mm.
donuts and coffee.
So the donut
Um,
store sign is like a monkey.
the donut store sign is like a monkey. It's a food cue.
So what
And
does Dunkin' Donuts do to make that cue more, effective?
well, they make it more salient. They make it as consistent. They make the reward as consistently available as possible. By the way, I
Okay.
did not say Dunkin' Donuts. You did, just so I don't get
I
sued.
did, it was me, totally me.
Okay. Um,
Uh,
but the big brands make the caloric rewards consistent and
mm,
reliable, so that
okay.
every time you pass the donut store sign, you can go inside and get a donut. Right?
Mhm.
There's very little chance you're going to see that monkey and not get to a banana tree.
Yep.
You're going to see that sign, and the donut is absolutely there, 100%. They make it very salient. They make it bright and colorful.
Mm,
Most branding is bright and colorful.
yeah.
In nature, we're told to eat the rainbow because the signaling of a diversity of bright color in nature is indicative of a diversity of micronutrients available. If I were to come to a field with bright green lettuce and red tomatoes and blueberries and yellow bananas and yellow carrots, and I ate some of each, and I just kept eating, I would be gathering a diversity of micronutrients.
Yep.
In our branded world, we use those colors to light up that part of the brain, but those nutrients are not
Mhm.
really there.
Mm.
And so we're kind of lighting the brain on fire to do what it's supposed to do, but then it doesn't get nutrition, and so it's really confused and it keeps looking for it.
Ah,
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
So they're doing this not only with, the food dyes that are in all the kids' really attractive junk food, but they're doing it with their brand colors too, right?
And the packaging. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I,
very
I knew
good.
I knew a food bar manufacturer who made a diverse, multicolored, vibrant package with like shiny rainbows of colors. And they actually took out the vitamins from the bar because the vitamins were a little expensive and making the bar taste bad. Um,
Wow.
and it's not just the food bar manufacturers; that goes on all across the industry. So
Wow.
it's scary.
Wow.
They they use the variety impulse in other ways. So not only if you see a variation in color in nature, are there a variety of micronutrients available, but if you had a variation in taste, like a slight variation in taste, there's probably a variety of micronutrients available.
Hmm.
For this reason, the chip manufacturers typically do not manufacture their chips on a unitary assembly line. They manufacture them on about a half a dozen assembly lines with slight variations in flavor, so that you keep eating as you're digging through the digging through the
Wow.
bag. Yeah,
Wait, that's fascinating. So they intentionally change the line so there's slightly different flavors.
there are, yes,
Wow.
yeah. I learned that from another client. Yeah,
That's fascinating.
yeah.
So, okay, I've never noticed a craving for different flavors on my plate, but I think all of us noticed the first thing that you said, that if there's only one or two colors on my plate, even though it's all great food choices, I'm still looking at it going, ugh, this
Hmm.
just doesn't look appealing, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
But when you throw on the red and the green and the vibrantness and you add some blueberries on the corner, it's like, this is the best ever. So I totally understand the colors. I've never really thought about how they put them in every place, their branding, the packaging, and then the food itself, of course. But this food, the taste thing, that fascinates me. I've really never thought about that. So they will
Yeah.
intentionally put in the different tastes, even if they're taking out the vitamins, because it makes us crave it more.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot,
Wow.
lot, lot going on. No, I don't mean to depress people. There are defenses against this. There are actually very simple ways to um, work your way out of this world, but you have to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, I forgot who said, if you don't have a plan, you'll fall for someone else's, or stand for
Mm,
something, or you'll fall for anything.
yeah.
It's kind of like that with food. You have to understand what's going on, and you have to do a little bit of thinking work to figure out what healthy food means for you personally so that you can create some tripwires and wake up. That's really what's required. You have to wake up at the moment of impulse and recognize what's happening.
Hmm.
And then you can say, like in the movie Network, well, I'm fed up with this and I'm not going to take it anymore. But
Yeah.
or just make a different choice. So
Yeah.
I don't mean to scare people. We can talk more about the practical solutions, but I think you want
Yeah,
to talk
for
a little more
sure.
about the
So it's
industry
really a
first.
lot of self talk, right? You're having the right things that you're telling yourself, and you're reminding yourself of, like you just said, how you can change your response to what's in front of you.
Yeah. Well, like for example, something else the food industry does is rely on plausible deniability. Um, so these potato chips are made with avocado oil, you know, kind of implying therefore they're good with you. Does
Hmm.
anybody really think potato chips are nutritious? Does anybody really think that making the chips with avocado oil is going to make them better for you? Virtually every study ever done on heated oil suggests that it's carcinogenic. The temperatures at which they heat the potato chips to in the first place create hydrocyclic amines, which are also carcinogenic. And like, I'm not against people having
Mm.
potato chips if they want to. I'm against them thinking that they're good for them.
Mm.
And all the rational brain really needs, because our like the evolutionary power of this reptilian brain to push the rational brain out of the way is so strong. All the rational brain really needs is a plausible excuse, and it doesn't take the time to really think through everything. So, oh my God, look at that star on the label that says this is made with avocado oil. So, so what I recommend people do in that case is say, what role do I want potato chips to play in my life? Um, and maybe you say, well, I only want to have one bag of potato chips on the weekends. That's, I'm not going to get rid of them completely. But I'm not going to fool myself into thinking they're good for me. There's a
Hmm.
big difference between something being less bad for you and good for you anyway. But I'm going to remember that potato chips are probably bad for me, but I'm going to have them on the weekend anyway for fun, because I'm allowed to do some things that are bad for me if I really want to. You'll get in a lot less trouble like that than
Yeah.
thinking that you're getting your omega-3s because you're eating this heated avocado oil.
Yeah. I'm going to pause this episode for a minute because I have a question for you. What's for dinner tonight? Are you maybe putting some steaks on the grill? Maybe you're grilling some hamburgers. It is that time of year, yes? But my follow up question for you, if your meal involves meat of any kind, actually, is do you happen to know what that animal was fed? Do you happen to know what its living conditions were? I know that that is not something we can always know about our food, but whenever possible, I love to be able to know it. And I'll tell you why. Because feedlot cows are fed a low quality grain and corn diet. Cows aren't meant to eat corn. So they have to be actually given preventative medicines before they even get sick, or they will be sick. And do you think that the poor diet and all the medicines that they're given impact the quality of the meat that we then turn around and feed our family? Absolutely. So I wanted to make sure that I introduce you to the real family because they do things differently on the real ranch. They choose to raise a healthy cow from the start, and they do it in a regenerative way that's good for the land, good for the cows, and very good for your family's dinner table. So please go to soulyrested.com/beef and check out that special offer that they have for you. And you also can dive into some beef shares. You can actually get a whole cow as a beef share if you would like and have your freezer filled for the next year with amazing food. But you can also get a mini share, or like I said, try out the special sample box that they have waiting for you. And guess what, guys? You don't even have to pay shipping. So go to solelyrested.com/beef.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have two responses to that. First of all, I have shared here on the show that for me, it's Coke Zero. I'll just admit it. I've admitted it before that I've always loved Coke Zero. But what I haven't told listeners, because I haven't talked about it in probably a year, is I don't know the last time that I had a Coke Zero. So I think doing what you just said, realizing the chips are bad, the Coke Zero is bad, but I'm going to have it once in a great while.
Hmm.
I think eventually, at least for me with the Coke, you get to the point that you don't even miss it. Eventually, because you've reminded yourself enough times, I know it's bad for myself. I'm just going to have it this once. Yeah, I know it's bad. I think you've eventually learned, am I right? And eventually for me,
But
I don't
two,
need it
two,
anymore.
2 out of 3 people for any given food substance can moderate it, and often when they moderate it, they decide to quit it.
Yeah.
If you've dug a deep enough neurological groove, then you might have to give it up entirely.
Mm.
Like that third person
That's a
needs to
very
give it up.
good point. That makes perfect sense. Yes. I'm glad you said that. And I think also, even though I just sat here and said, I don't know the last time I don't have it anymore, I've also left it open in my mind. I'm okay if I do drink it at some point in the future. It's not the end of the world,
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
for some people, maybe it would be. And that's a very good point.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm in favor, and this is a little controversial in the field,
Hmm.
but I'm in favor of using very specific food rules to regulate only the danger points. So if I was a city traffic planner, I would make an assessment of the intersections in the city, and I would put the necessary controls at the right intersections. If there weren't a lot of accidents at a given intersection, I probably wouldn't put a traffic light. I'd probably put a stop sign. Or maybe there would be some things that were way out in the country. Like I remember in Long Island, there were these roads that were 55-mile-an-hour roads, and they would intersect without a stop sign or a traffic light at all because there were just so few people who used them. It wasn't really a dangerous intersection.
Hmm.
The point is that my role as a city traffic planner would be to balance and optimize for 2 things. One would be the freedom of the populace to move around so that they could socialize and conduct commerce. The other would be the safety of the roads. I have to balance those 2 variables. When you are creating your own food economy, you need to make an assessment of what your danger points are and balance your ability to freely and spontaneously enjoy food with the necessity of protecting your health and fitness goals. So you're
Mm.
still balancing those 2 things. I think you want to have maximum enjoyment of food, but not at the expense of your health and fitness. And it's a very personal thing for each person because it really does depend upon, to some extent, genetics. Like some people are more vulnerable to sugar or flour or alcohol than
Yeah.
other people. To some extent, your personal experience, and to some extent, your psychology. Like how many of the psychological factors that could drive overeating are you attending to, and which are you really vulnerable to. So it's a very personal thing, and I mostly tell people to start with one simple rule, just to go along the lines of your program.
Hmm.
I find it works much better rather than trying to lose weight really quickly or go on this big diet. If there's no medical emergency, and ask your doctor, please. You start with one simple rule. I knew this trucker who had to eat fast food 3 times a day, and he said, "You know what? I'm not going to stop, but I won't go back for seconds." That was his simple rule. What
Hmm.
have you done? And all of a sudden, now there's this tripwire. When he's out on the road, he's tired, he's hungry, whatever, and he hears himself thinking about going back for seconds. He says, "Wait a minute. I never go back for seconds. I'm not a person who goes back for seconds." And he just kind of wakes up and he has that opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Or if I say, "I'll never have chocolate on a weekday again," that was one of my first rules. I'll only
Yeah.
ever have it on the weekend and no more than 2 ounces. If I'm in a coffee shop and there's a big hairy chocolate bar at the counter calling my name,
A
and I
big
hear
hairy
this,
one.
a big hairy one, yeah, and I hear this little voice in my head that says, "You know what, Glenn? You worked out hard enough. You're not going to gain any weight. It'll be just easy to start your silly rule again tomorrow." I'll say, "Wait a minute, that's not me. I used to call it my inner pig. Now we call it a food monster. But I say that's my inner pig squealing for pig slop. Chocolate is pig slop on a Wednesday. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. Just
Yeah.
this like kind of little aversive game so that you
Yeah.
say, I want to be in charge. I don't want this reptilian brain to be in charge. I used to think you were supposed to love yourself more at that point. I used to think you had to love yourself thin. But remember, this part of the brain doesn't know love. This is an eat, mate, or kill thing. So I find it works a lot better to get control, to have a more aggressive alpha wolf kind of attitude. And when an alpha wolf is threatened for leadership, it doesn't say, "Oh my goodness, someone needs a hug," right? It growls and it snarls and it intimidates the
Yeah.
intruder back into line. So that's kind of the approach we take. And then, once you're awake, you've kind of pried apart a space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you could do a couple of different things. One of the most effective things that I did, and I was not going to teach this, was I just learned how to disempower the logic of that reptilian brain, because
Hmm.
there would be this justification, like it'll be just as easy to start tomorrow.
Right.
And I would say it won't. The way the brain works, the principle of neuroplasticity says, if I have a craving for chocolate today and I say I'll just start tomorrow, and then I eat the chocolate, I will have reinforced both the craving and the thought that I'll start tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'll be more likely to say I'll start tomorrow, and I'll have a deeper craving for chocolate. So if you're in a hole, stop digging. You can only use the present moment to be healthy. That's how I recovered. I spent years keeping a journal of all the crazy things my inner pig would said, and
Yeah.
I got to the point that I was able to make that work. So there's
Yeah.
more to it, but I know you have other
And you
questions.
put so many of those exact things that helped you, right here in the book for all of us. So, and then we can, like you said, it doesn't have to be our inner pig. We can make up, we can decide how we want that voice to go and decide what's going to work the best for us. Like for me, it was always Bible verses. There were very specific Bible verses that helped me refocus when I lost weight and helped me remember what was important and how I use my body as a temple of the Holy Spirit, how that did not match with me sitting down and eating a bag of cookies.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think all of us, however you want to have that voice, you have so many great tips right here in your book that can give us all ideas for how we can at the moment, first of all, recognize the moment and see that chocolate bar is hairy, thank you. And also then how we're going to respond. And once it's worked just a few times, at least for me, my experience was that it got a little, not, I wouldn't say easier, but I realized, okay, this is working, and that gave me more motivation then to keep going when
Do,
I was
do,
down in that hole to stop digging.
do you want to talk about that? Do you want to talk about how cravings are extinguished? Because there are a couple of little scientific points that would help. I don't know
Absolutely.
how much more time we have.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a few more minutes on the recording schedule. Let's absolutely do that.
Okay. So most people think that if I stop having chocolate, let's say I wanted to give up donuts on the way
Mhm.
home from work. Most people think I stop, I drive past the donut sign, I have a really strong craving, but I kind of bear with it. They think that day by day, the cravings are going to go down just like this. And so they're trying to get through and expecting things to get better day by day. That's not what actually happens. See, in the wild, 100,000 years ago, if Thag followed a monkey to a banana tree and followed a monkey to a banana tree and followed a monkey to a banana tree, the brain would have established this reliable pattern that says monkeys equals bananas. And that was very important when food was scarce. Now, if it got to be later in the season and all of a sudden there were no bananas at the tree when he got there, so he followed a monkey and it led to a barren tree
Mhm.
because other monkeys had found it or they just ran out, Thag's brain wouldn't give up at that point because following a monkey to a banana tree that leads to bananas 80% of the time is much more valuable than not having a monkey at all. As a matter of fact, a monkey that led to a banana tree 20% of the time would be much more valuable than no monkey at all.
Okay.
So what actually happens is when you stop reinforcing the craving, your brain says, "Oh, no more bananas. No more donuts. Those signs don't equal donuts anymore. I don't believe you. I don't want to give up that signal. I'm going to have to try to see if it's available at random." So in the past, Thag's brain would have doubled down on the dopamine. It would have made him twice as motivated, give him twice as stronger craving. So after a couple of days
Mm.
of a honeymoon period, the brain's going to have this reaction we call an extinction burst, where it's testing to see if the reward has become intermittently available at random. And it's going to spike your cravings like you've never felt before.
Hmm.
And that's the point at which most people say, "Oh my God, this is not working. I'm going to be tortured forever. I can't do this. I'm just compulsively
Hmm.
addicted beyond all hope and
Yeah.
reason." Right? But what actually happens then is that the brain also does not want to waste energy. So if its extinction burst doesn't work, then it's going to start letting go little by
Hmm.
little by little. Somewhere around the 21 to 30 day mark, it's going to have a couple of little more tries. And then it's going to label the craving as dormant. It's going to label that food signal as dormant. So it's not going to forget about it because it was a survival learning. It thought that it kept you alive. So if for any reason you reinforce it again, the brain is going to want to go, and be immediately readdictive and immediately reactivated. But it's not going to bother you because it doesn't want to waste energy anymore. Usually when people get to this
Hmm.
point, they get a little cocky and they say, "I've got this thing." And then they randomly reinforce it again. And then they're starting the extinction curve all over again.
Ah,
So
interesting.
if you want to keep having donuts at the donut store, you could say, "I will never have donuts at the donut store on a weekday again. I'll only ever have it on Saturday after a workout and no more than two of them." Your brain is capable of understanding the complexity of signals. So now you're not just responding to a monkey, you're responding to a monkey on Saturdays when it's raining, right?
Hmm.
And just like in Las Vegas, if I set the slot machine to only pay off on Saturdays, you wouldn't see those old ladies in the on the slot machine just
Sitting there
compulsively
with their
pull.
buckets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the casino would empty out very quickly during the week, and it would only be filled on Saturday mornings.
Yeah.
So if you eat by design, this is where I'm saying two out of three people can moderate if they're very specific about what their plans are. And that third person, if that doesn't work for you, then you'll have to give it up entirely. There's
Okay.
more that I could tell you about cravings, but those are the essentials that will help people from making the mistakes that they make that stop them from extinguishing them.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That combined with a little more insight that we now have to the food industry and the way they market to us, I think it's a good thing. We have like this double bit of protection that we can fight off these cravings a little bit more now that we have more knowledge, I feel
I
like.
hope
So thank
so.
you so
I,
much.
I hope so. It certainly helped me and a couple of
Yeah.
thousand other people.
And
Yeah.
by the way, I had 2 things I said and I forgot to back up. You said that avocado oils are I actually have never thought of this because in my mind, avocado oil chips are still gonna be better than, the horrible ones with the really bad oils,
A little
like
bit, a little bit.
a little bit, okay.
but but,
It's a
but
little bit.
heating oil is not really a good idea. That's
Yeah,
my.
yeah,
I'm not a food scientist. I'm not a dietitian, but I've seen a bunch of studies, and
yeah.
heated oils, especially at those temperatures, are not a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
still feel like my homemade potato chips and our homemade lard is a little better for me, so I'm gonna stick with them. I'm
definitely,
not gonna give them
definitely,
up.
definitely.
Well, Glenn, thank you so much for taking the time to break this down for us. Tell us where folks can find you and how they can get a copy of your book, Defeat Your Cravings: The Back Door to Weight Loss.
So you can get a copy in the Kindle Nook or PDF version for free at defeatyourcravings.com.
Ooh,
If you
I'll put that link in the show notes. Awesome.
just click the big blue button and sign up for the reader bonus list. You will get that. You'll get a copy of the food plan starter templates. This is a diet agnostic program. Right? I'm not a nutritionist or dietitian or medical
Mhm.
doctor, so we work with people on any reasonable dietary philosophy: ketogenic, vegetarian, point counting, calorie counting, high
Okay.
carb, low calorie,
All of it.
carnivore, all of
Mhm.
it. As long as you're not trying to starve yourself,
Yeah.
we can help you. And so we have a set of rules that you might want to consider starting with for any of those philosophies.
So repeat
And
again where they can get that. Repeat that again.
defeatyourcravings.com.
Okay.
And click the big blue button. The last thing
Great.
you'll get is a full-length set of coaching sessions, so you can see how this works in practice. It's a lot of information, but it's actually a pretty simple process. So
Sweet. Sweet. Well, thank you so much, Glenn. This has been great.
thank you for having me on. It was great.
And thanks for listening, friends. Remember, it is easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy those simple, everyday efforts. It's not easy, but it's a very good life.